Welcome to our Death Rituals series, a series dedicated to exploring how cultures around the world honor death, grief, and remembrance. From the vibrant altars of Dia de los Muertos to the quiet precision of traditional embalming, from indigenous mourning ceremonies to the inked memorials of modern tattooists. Each episode uncovers how humans give meaning to loss through ritual, through intimate conversations with those who tend to death, museum curators, artists, cultural leaders, and funeral professionals. We look at how ceremony, creativity, and community transform grief into connection. It's about the universal ways we celebrate, remember, and carry forward the lives of those who came before us. Revealing how we face death says everything about how we choose to live. This is part 2 of our episode with Genevieve Keeney-Vazquez. Genevieve is a U.S. Army veteran who began her career as a medic, serving our military death response teams before transitioning into the funeral profession. She's now the president and CEO of the National Museum of Funeral History in Houston. Genevieve holds degrees in psychology and mortuary science, as well as a master's in nonprofit and association management. She's dedicated her career to helping people better understand death, grief, and remembrance. Her path from military to mortuary science to museum leadership offers such a fascinating window into how we find meaning, even in life's most difficult moments. Enjoy.
I love that you have so many different death rituals encompassed in your museum to help the living, the grieving, to respect the dead and memorialize them or help them continue living in some fashion, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to help their spirit, their soul to pass on. A lot of times that these cultures and rituals, some of them you'll have some people that turn to their religion to understand what the culture and ritual steps are needed to take for that soul to transcend into its next life, whatever you believe in. Others believe that there's certain traditions and customs that have to take place in order for that soul to transcend. There are some cultures and traditions that believe that the body has to be buried within 24 hours, right? In order for that soul to transcend into its next life. So yes, to me, all customs, cultures, religion are also, you're right, to help the living go through that grieving process, but also to help the dead transcend into their next life, whatever it may be. As well as you have the professionals in the funeral industry who are there to ensure that the body's properly cared for, properly disposed of, so that we don't end up with any type of a pandemic from uncared bodies. If you look historically back in the day when they would just discard bodies, not properly take care of them, then we would get a pandemic of an outbreak, which would lead to more bodies, right? So there's a part of our job that is not only caring for those they leave behind, caring for the body, but caring for the community.
Can you tell us about one exhibit and what you've learned in putting it together, but also obviously what visitors will learn about a death ritual?
One of them I think is kind of fascinating is, and I get the question from time to time, is our Ghana coffins. People say, people are actually buried in those? The answer is yes. They look rather small. One of the other things I like to point out that you can see in the evolution of our industry is that we were smaller people back then. Mm. We didn't have all these foods that were full of GMOs and all these preservatives that obviously had its, heyday on our genetic makeup and kind of cultivating us into bigger people, right? Overall. So our caskets were smaller, the design was smaller. But with the Ghana coffins, they are different shapes and sizes. You have a crab, you have a Mercedes, you have an airplane, you have an onion shallot, you have a tiger, you have all these different animals. And the interesting fact about those is, although they're very culturally enriched into the Ghana West Africa culture, if you choose to be buried in one of those, you cannot have your funeral in a church because they're considered sacrilegious. And so there's a clashing of culture and religion when it comes to utilizing them as a burial container. And yes, they do go in the ground. They do get buried. The hole gets dug. It gets lined with cement. And then the beautifully designed, crafted coffin, I should say it's a coffin, gets laid into the ground with you in it. And then, of course, learning the difference, because you guys just heard me say coffin and casket and how we use those interchangeably. But there actually is a difference between a casket and a coffin. The casket, which comes from the French term casse, casse is also known as a jeweled box, something that we hold our treasures in, things that we love, right? We put it into our jewelry box for safekeeping. And so a casse mimics that in that it is a box specially designed to put that in which we love in for an eternity for safekeeping. A casket is hinged, I say, like a door, where it'll only open off on one side. And sometimes the lid is in its entirety, and sometimes its lid is in two, where you can keep the lower portion closed and just open the top. So that is a coffin. And a casket tends to take different shapes. The most commonly known shape of a coffin is that of Dracula's coffin, right? It widens at your shoulders and narrows at your feet, sometimes called a toe pincher. And the other thing that distinguishes a casket from a coffin is that a coffin lid comes off in its entirety. We're starting to see a merging of the two.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You'll see something that is of a different shape but has a hinged lid. All right. It's not your traditional rectangular shape. So, and then you can see rectangular boxes now with a lid that comes off its entirety. So now I'm sitting there scratching my head going, do I call it a coffin or do I call it a casket?
And is there a cultural or religious beginning of a casket versus a coffin?
No, not in the casket versus coffin. However, there is a lot of religious and cultural influence on the burial container itself, or how a person is prepared for their burial. There's religions that only shroud the body, right? Well, Jewish customs also have burial containers, but their burial container contains no metal. Everything is with wood. Even the dowels are with wood. So the casket is completely held together by wood.
This is my tradition, so I'm more familiar with it.
Okay.
Although I'm actually going to have somebody in this series to talk about, and hopefully in many religions or cultures, the tradition of sitting with the body. Mm-hmm. There are some really, really interesting traditions. I'm more familiar with the Jewish traditions, but about respecting the body and protecting the body between death and laying to rest.
Yes, definitely. And sitting, like you say, sitting with the body. Shiva, right?
Well, this is actually, Shiva is after the body is in the ground. There's a period of time between when the body has not yet gone in the ground, which should be, technically within 24 hours, where somebody's constantly with the body. So the body is never alone. And there are all kinds of rules about, you say prayers and you're not supposed to reach over the body. There are all of these rules, and I'm going to learn more about them. I think it's just so fascinating that different cultures and religions not only have rituals about the laying to rest, but about the process between death and the laying to rest. And that those are rituals to help both the living and to honor and protect the dead.
Yes, definitely. Like, we're talking about some of these customs and rituals, the Victorian time period, where they would cover the mirrors with black cloth. The widow would be adorned completely in black, where black was actually a custom to be worn at funerals. And interesting enough, people are asking, even today, they've been asking my daughters on Facebook, what do we wear to the funeral? Because we have evolved from the traditional black to adding color, to add some pizzazz, which back in the Victorian period, you wouldn't add color into your wardrobe until a full year has passed from the grieving process. Yeah. So it's interesting that that's one of the customs and traditions that have evolved most recent. Because I am too. I'm perplexed as to what I should wear to my own mother's funeral. Should I wear the traditional black? Or should I put a pop of color? Or should I wear the dark blue dress that my mom bought me for my birthday? I'm struggling with that. And now I think I can look back on it and appreciate this tradition, because trying to figure out what to wear to a funeral is really daunting. Kind of like how I told my husband, I loved it in the military because I never had to worry about what I was going to wear every day, right? And now I'm faced with that same challenge for my mom's funeral.
I grew up in a pretty religious home. I'm not personally very religious, and my faith is Judaism, but I married a Catholic, and so we have all of that. But one of the things that I love about religion, any religion, is that it it tells you what to do in times of great sorrow and great joy, I feel like. And I think that is really a gift to know, like you're saying, just to give me some instructions, like do this,
Yeah.
then do this, then do that. And I think so many of these rituals and traditions are rooted in the history of, people in the beginning obviously didn't go to school and get a degree in psychology, but of observing humans and
Mhm.
what they need. And I think religion, particularly in death, has evolved over time to give people what they need. And they may not know that they need it.
We are lost, right? There are times when we find ourselves lost, and we need a beacon of light to help guide us. And I think that's exactly what the religion and customs do at times like this. I'm a Christian, I'm a believer, but I don't have any roots to really look to help me in this process. My grandparents, they didn't have a traditional funeral. They already pre-planned their funeral, and they said, we don't want a funeral. And when we die, just, load us up and put us, my grandfather was cremated. My grandmother was buried. She was put into a crypt. She wasn't buried in the ground. She's put up high in the crypt on the top so she can look down over my grandpa. That's what she wanted to do. And looking back on that, when my grandparents did die, and they died pretty close together, I thought, how dare they? How dare they rob us from that tradition of a funeral? Because really, a funeral is not for the dead. The funeral is for the living. It's for the people that they leave behind to come together, to share their memories and begin that grieving process. So I don't feel that a funeral should ever be not had. I know that's not the best way to word that, but it kind of struck a little anger nerve there.
Yeah.
Thinking back on not being able to do that. But at the same time, it gives me great joy in knowing that I'm having a beautiful funeral for my mother planned.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tell us about the Jazz Funerals exhibit. So this exhibit fuses music and celebration into a ritual of mourning in a way that I think does challenge a lot of us as we think about death, because so many of us think about death as a quiet and sad and serious time. This is different and just as important, but I think it's also one of the beautiful things about your museum, and I will have to get there in person, is to challenge our notions of what death is, and that there's like one right way to die or to honor the dead, and opening our perspectives on the many ways that there are to honor and respect the dead and the living.
Yeah. And I think that it goes back to personal preference and what you need in the moment to grieve, right? But there are times when you do maybe find yourself of what's acceptable and what's not, right? What crosses that line and now is considered disrespectful versus respectful, right? But jazz funerals, I have to say that is one event that has stood the test of time and has only become more acceptable. I think that it is actually something that could go beyond the borders of its traditional birthplace of Louisiana and really be celebrated in other places. So jazz funeral basically is celebrating that life, but they have this marching band that is identified and made up of band members, and they all know their place in the line of this procession. It's a walking procession of music being played by the band with the leader and then the family members and mourners to follow. Sometimes the body can be present or the body can be absent, but it is an opportunity, I think, that basically addresses two things. It addresses the grief of the family, allowing them to celebrate, but it also allows the community to become aware that a death has occurred and this death is marching by, and also helps remind us that death happens and that you're alive today. So guess what? Celebrate today. And they also believe that the music helps guide the spirit as well. Because if you notice, they'll march all the way into the cemetery to the final resting place. So they're just basically guiding that spirit, if you will, into their final resting place.
And is there a like the music, is it different for depending on what that person loved or played or listened to, or can it be anything?
It's primarily like jazz themed type of music. It's called a jazz funeral for a reason, and it's very upbeat, very whimsical kind of music that is all instrumental. So, if you think that they might have some solemn verses within it to continue to address that downward pendulum swing of that heavy emotion, and then they're going to bring you right up back out of it. It's almost like a reminder through music that you're going to have grief, but then you're going to have, you'll have the grief, you'll have the heaviness of the grief, but it'll lift, right? You'll come out of it and you'll experience joy. But it's almost like a roller coaster, right?
Yeah.
You'll have that up and that down, just like I experienced yesterday. I was like, I had a great day yesterday. I don't know what happened today.
And just like I've experienced in the 11 years since my father died, it's up and down. It doesn't, grief stays with you. It changes, but it still stays with you.
Oh, yeah. You'll forever grieve. Grieving is a lifelong process. And I think it's important for people to understand that it's just like death is a part of life, grief is a part of life, right? It's part of recognizing that loss. One time somebody had told me that, because I was with a patient and I had come out of the room crying. And one of my coworkers said, "Why are you crying?" I said, "Because I'm human."
Yeah.
I said, "The day that I don't cry is the day I need to get out of this profession, because it's important for me to stay connected."
Yeah.
And that grieving process is a way for us to stay connected. I almost felt guilty yesterday for having an up day, because it was like, where are the tears, right? Where did they go? And it's almost like, does this mean I'm going to forget my loved one now because I'm not crying today? No. Our body needs to rest. Our mind needs to recover. So the body, I think, naturally goes through this ebb and flow with these emotions so we can recover. And I never had experienced this heavy weight of grief before. I mean, it's a cry that comes from a portion of your gut, if you will. It's like the middle of it's like where your soul resides, right? Mm-hmm. And it comes from deep within, and it's a different kind of cry that I've heard it before because of my profession as a palliative nurse. But actually performing that cry myself was profound, and I allowed myself to experience it. Luckily, the door was closed and I knew that people could hear me, but I didn't care in that moment. I was grieving. But after that, I had a ringing in one ear for 2 days straight. I couldn't get rid of the ringing. And I don't know if it was because I had this overabundance of this emotional crying ceremony and session that I'd never had before, and it affected my ears in some way. But it was really interesting. Our body goes through a different wave of emotions, psychological, physiological effects with grief. I think it's really important for us to know that grief can get better, but like you said, never go away. And it's all in how we handle our grief. Try not to mask it, but to experience it, to live it, let it run its course.
Yeah,
and its
absolutely.
course will be forever.
Yeah, absolutely. You also have an exhibit on death photography. I'm just fascinated by this. We're actually trying to get a guest in this series on death in body art, which is like a whole nother area. But have you seen art forms like photography capturing death help people with grief? Or tell us a little bit about the exhibit and what you've observed. I mean, you told us your own story with death photography in Germany. And again, different cultures will feel differently about it, etc. But that exhibit is fascinating to me.
Well, death photography, it began before even the concept of photography ever existed. But it was done through art, through painting, because, painting was the way that we captured the images of ourselves and our family members. And I've always said that, portrait, be it through art or through film, is a way to capture our existence. And so the death photography in the earlier time periods when photography was quite an arduous task. I mean, if you look at the cameras back then, and once you have a flash, you have to change the whole bulb. And a lot of times scheduling a photographer was expensive, but also there were times when it might have been weeks before the photographer could actually get to you because we were spread out all over. And sometimes people unfortunately passed away, and they used death photography as a form of recording their existence within the family, right? It was that family portrait, that one family portrait that they probably will only have because they spent so much on the photographer, or it took so long for the photographer to get there. So that was some of my research in studying the postmortem photography and what its use was and why did they have it, right? Then it went into postmortem photography, became also very instrumental in the healthcare profession and helping doctors understand what the causes of death and stuff like that and what it looks like. And then also on the forensic side, death photography was important in helping solve crimes and so forth and so on. So death photography has a lot of different, faces to it and different reasons for its existence. Even today now, we're talking about different death photography or different ways that we could incorporate an image of our loved one. I actually have an image of my sister her image is put together with her ashes. So you're seeing my sister through my sister. Her ashes is the median that was used to create her image.
Oh.
Yes. It's in our cremation exhibit, in our area in the cremation exhibit of what you can do with cremated remains, the different techniques of the artisans from around the world and the way that they bring together their talent to create a memorialization of your loved one. And I met this amazing artist, Haida Hatchery, out of New York, and that was her talent. It was actually through the grief of a very dear friend of hers that she found healing in creating this portrait of him using his own ashes.
That's amazing. When you first said that, I was thinking you had a picture of your sister, because I've seen that on headstones now, a little bit more like a picture of the individual, but this is totally wild. I've never heard this before.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's called Icons in Ash.
Okay.
So bringing your loved one into they're utilizing their ashes to create their image. So very, very profound.
I mean, that's amazing. What do visitors usually find most meaningful or surprising about their experience at the museum?
I noticed that not many people shared what they find meaningful, but I can tell you they all share their surprises.
Okay.
I always say if I had a nickel for every time I heard the word wow, I'd be much closer to my retirement. Wow is the common word that I hear from visitors. It's wow, I didn't know all of this stuff was in here. Wow, it's so well displayed. Wow, I didn't know that this museum was so interesting. The amount of exhibits and how it's laid out, how it tells the stories, they just are wowed by so much of it because they're getting exposed to stuff that everyone knows about death, right? Death. And sometimes we get judged, like a book gets judged by its cover. I always tell people, don't judge us by our name. Yes, we are the National Museum of Funeral History. We even thought of changing the name just to get people to embrace us and accept us. And I said, no, that's an injustice. Let's not do that. We represent the funeral industry. We represent death. And in death, there's funerals. And that's what we do. And to call it anything else is injustice. So wow is what people share. That's their surprise word. And it seems to be consistent.
I'm not surprised.
I can't wait to get your reaction. We're going to have to do a follow-up story after you visit.
Yes.
We'll do a recording here at the museum.
I love it. Let's do it. Let's plan the trip. So, in your experience, can you tell us the threads that run through death rituals across cultures and religions? Are there striking either similarities or differences that you've observed over the years?
I mean, the similarity across the religions, the customs, the cultures is that we all die. That's the similarity. That's one similarity that will never, ever be modified. However, what I did notice is that It's a similarity, yet it defines the differences in that we all believe that our body, our soul is going to go on in some way or go up in some way or transcend to some other life. We all believe that death is not finite. Majority of people, if you have a cultural religious belief, you know that death is not finite, right? That there's something else beyond that. And we've heard that from people who have had near-death experiences. We're reinforced with it by our culture. So that's a commonality, but what we believe happens is different amongst us. That's probably the best way I can answer that question.
Yeah. Is there one thing about death or funerals you wish everybody understood?
I wish that everybody would understand, and it's totally impossible because society just doesn't allow for it, and our biological makeup doesn't allow for it either. I wish everyone would just believe and understand that we all die. There's no cheating death, no matter what you do. People want to cryotherapy themselves and come back 100 years from now. Death becomes us all. And I wish everybody would embrace that at all stages of life. And I think if we did, we would probably be a more closely intertwined and connected society. We are so disconnected, and death just disconnects us even more, because if we haven't experienced death, it's really hard to connect with somebody who has.
Yeah, I talked about that a lot in my first series with a mother who lost her 11-year-old child to cancer and another individual who lost both their parents to suicide, and that a lot of us don't know what to do when somebody is grieving, and we do the wrong thing, which is to ignore it. Heather Manson is this mother, and she said, just don't ignore it. This happened. It will forever be part of my life, and please just don't pretend like it didn't happen. As awkward as it may be, that's the worst thing you can do. So there's probably no right answer, but the wrong answer is to ignore it, I think.
It's interesting you say that, because today is my first day that I've walked back into my work environment at the museum since my mother passed away. I actually was on my way to the museum that Monday morning when I got the phone call that I had to just go to the nursing home. Thankfully, I got there in time, and, she was in her agonal breathing stage, and I was able to be there with her, every step of that last 2 hours. But it was my first day back. And to your point that you just spoke of, I walked in and my accountant was in her office, and, well, I was going to tell you that I'm sorry for your loss. I just wanted to let you know, but I'm sure you've heard enough of it. And I wasn't sure if it was appropriate for me to say it to you. I said, no, you can never. I said, please do say it. I can't hear it enough. Okay. I welcomed it. And not even 10 minutes later, my security guard walks in, and we are talking about just general business for the day. And he stopped and he looked at me and he paused, and I looked at him and he goes, I want to give you a hug, but I'm probably sure you're tired of hugs. And I was like, no, I can never have enough hugs. No, I can never have enough sorries. No, never have enough recognition that I am going through my grieving process right now. And I even found myself, when Sunday hit, Sunday was the day before it would be a week that my mother died. And I told my husband, I hate taking showers right now. Because when I'm in the shower, my mind just roams, and it just comes up with the craziest concepts. And I find myself just kind of like fighting my brain, and my husband like, are you okay in there? I'm like, yeah, I'm just having a thought that I don't want in my head right now. But they keep rushing in when I'm in the shower. And it's Sunday, I'm taking the shower, and I thought, tomorrow is Monday. It's been a week. Does that mean that my grief is over? Are people expecting me to come back normal tomorrow because it's been a week? What is the timeline? And I'm in the profession now, you all. I know you all know that I'm in the profession. I've been around the dying and the dead for over 30 years now. And here I found myself in the shower going, tomorrow is Monday and it's been a week. Does that mean I'm done grieving? That's the same questions that happen to the most professional of us, you know? And I found myself questioning, what do I do? How do I behave? What's right? What's wrong? And I think the answer is there is no right or wrong. I be how I want to be. And I had an upbeat day yesterday. My husband came home from work and I was like, wow, honey, I was really focused today. I got this done and this done and this done. We went to dinner and he said, honey, have a margarita. And I said, okay. I kid you not, I was 2 sips into my margarita, everybody. Just 2 sips into my margarita. And I was in a really upbeat and I said, honey, this is the margarita talking. And I wanted to go share something with him. And it had to do with my mama. And I just bawled. I just broke down. I couldn't talk. I was bawling right there in the restaurant and I didn't care. And I know the waiters and the waitress was coming around going, what is wrong with this lady? You know, but I didn't care. You know, I had a grief breakdown at dinner and I just let it be.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
And it's okay. And your museum is a place where people can come and learn that it's okay, minded that it's okay, and hopefully learn through all of these different cultures and traditions what they think will work for them.
Exactly. And some people will feel like they're on an island. Some people are okay with being on an island and put themselves on an island. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to go outside my house. I felt safe within my space. And everyone was okay with that. But sometimes we need our village, right? We will need our village to help pull us out of it from time to time, to help put us back on our path, our course, and know that it's okay. Grieving is okay. It's how you grieve. Just don't do it in. I sometimes feel like if people can't grieve in a healthy way, it could lead to more life-altering events. Like if you choose drinking as a form of masking your pain of grief, you can become an alcoholic. That could have negative effects on your profession, on your livelihood, on your family. So a lot of times you see people who are alcoholics, you see people who are drug addicts. Sometimes you got to stop and think, what is the root to that? What created it? Because everything can have a snowball effect. And sometimes I often wonder if these people are not lost in their grief process somewhere. They got lost. They didn't get to grieve in a healthy manner.
In the last series, one of the books that was recommended is, and I think I'm getting this right, The Smell of Rain on Dust. And the author talks about the trauma that can be generational trauma of not dealing with grief. Like you might not even know why you are feeling a way that could have had to do with something that happened in a generation before you. So it's just fascinating. I was speaking in the series before this is on wellness, and I spoke with a psychologist whose grandparents were both in the Holocaust, and she talked about how that affected her parents, how it affected her. Fascinating, like through the generations, food insecurity, sense of physical insecurity, just with the fires in LA, because her mother still lives in LA. And these things travel through the generations if we don't address them. That's why I think it's so important to talk about death and grieving. We must do it. If we don't do it, it's at our peril, One
of the things I want to point out in what you just said is grief has many faces. Grief isn't just about death. Grief is about the loss of something that held value to you, the loss of something that gave you a sturdy, strong foundation. Losing your home in a fire, losing it to a natural disaster, losing a child and losing your loved one in a divorce. I mean, again, grief has so many faces. And I think it's important that people understand that grief is a process and it's okay to feel the emotions that come from it. And I can tell you right now, from bona fide experience, I'm experiencing emotions that I don't even have a name for. And I'm like, why is that? Why do I feel this way? And I think one of my emotions right now that I'm truly battling with is guilt. Guilt is a very heavy emotion that is polluting my grief.
Is it the guilt of being alive?
No, I had that guilt when my sister died. I lost both my sisters to cancer 3 days apart, and I had survivor's guilt. So I've experienced that, and I've worked through that. My guilt is feeling like I could have done more for my mother. So many people were trying to get me to see the writing on the wall. Mind you, I'm a palliative nurse. I understand I'm a funeral profession. And everyone kept trying to get me to see the writing on the wall. And I had an eraser in my back pocket, and I kept erasing the writing. Mm-hmm. And I look back on that and said, why did I keep erasing it?
Because you're human.
Yeah, I got to remember that too, right? Human is the commonality here, right? We're all human, and grief is a part of, grief is just like being happy, being sad, being angry. For some reason, I don't think as a society we still embrace grief and give it the credit it deserves.
I completely agree. One more question before I ask you the 5 questions I like to ask everybody. We started this conversation with you sharing that you were 7 years old when you saw this newscast of this baby, and that set you on this path. And I may not get the words exactly right, but you said something like you were searching for something, but you didn't know what you were searching for in death. Do you feel like you found it?
Oh, most definitely. I am so grounded now. I have found what I was searching for. I know my purpose in life. And I think that that's another important element for people, is to find your purpose. Because when you find your purpose, you live a better life. And when death does come you won't have any regrets.
Okay, last 5 questions. As we explore in my brand, Amatand, which is French for to take care of your soul, objects can hold a lot of meaning for us. We were talking about this earlier. They can tie us to the past, enable us to be more present, or sometimes even take us into the future. Can you share an object from your life, whether you still have it or not, that holds a lot of meaning for you, and tell us why?
Yes, so the object that holds a lot of meaning for me, and I still have it today, is this pajama doll that my grandmother made me. And it's a doll that is made of material her body is a pouch for the pajamas to be housed in. And the pajamas are made out of the exact same material as the doll. And it's supposed to sit on your bed so that in the morning when you wake up, you fold up your pajamas, you put them in the pajama doll, and you leave the pajama doll on your bed. So when you get home at night after you take your bath, you pull your pajamas out of your pajama doll, and now you have matching pajamas with your doll, and you go to sleep. And I still have that doll today. And the obvious is that it reminds me of my grandmother. But I think the other unknown to myself is it reminds me that I was a child. Yeah. And I still will pull the jammies out every now and then and be like, oh, look how small I used to be. It's kind of cute.
And a child who was well taken care of, to have that. I've never heard of a pajama doll. Was that a thing?
I don't know. I'd be curious to look it up and see.
Yeah.
My grandmother loved to sew, and so she made the pajama doll.
That's awesome. I love that. That's a new one for me. Can you share a favorite tradition with us? It could be anything from when you were a child, something you did or do with your family today, anything at all.
Yeah, so my mom and I always had this tradition that every time we would walk away from each other, and I carry the condition onto my children, is that we always say, I love you. And I love you sometimes can be a platitude for most. So my mom and I, we have our special. It's, I love you always, always. And when my mom was in her dying process weeks ago, when I was not sure I really thought she was still fighting. And I said, I love you always, always, Mom. And she would try in her best way to repeat it back to me. And it let me know she was still there. So that's a tradition that my brother and I are carrying on now. And I took it and modified it with my children. So I hope that the time when I come to pass, my kids will always remember that when they say they love me, I always tell them I love you more.
Mm.
So that's a tradition that we carry on, is always tell somebody you love them, because you never know if you'll see them again.
Well, with my mom, it's still, but my mom is also going through some neurological condition, but it was, I love you to the moon and back. And
That's awesome.
I had another guest, Kane Hodder, who played Jason Voorhees in multiple Friday the 13th. And he was burned over like half of his body early in his career. And with his children, he always says, I love you at the end of every conversation. And for him, it was because he lost his father. I mean, this is years and years ago. And he had been leaving his home to go to California for something. And his dad was in the easy chair and he didn't say, I love you. And his dad ended up dying. And it is, you just never know.
Yeah.
You never know. So
I think a lot of it was rooted with me being in the military, because I never knew what the day would hold. And whenever I would leave my children, I always told them I love them. And it was very important to me, because you never know when you're coming home, if you're coming home. And it just kind of, I think, evolved even after the fact. And my husband now, I always say I love you. And then it's, radio silence on the other end. And I'm like, hello, you're supposed to tell me you love me back. He was like, huh? Because that wasn't a tradition he grew up with, right? I mean, he didn't hear those words. I've won him over.
Perfect. Amazing. Are you in a phase in your life where you enjoy entertaining in your home? Why or why not?
That's a yes and no answer.
Okay.
Yes, because I love being around people. People, whether we want to or not, really help our processes in life. I like to share my joy for life with others. Bringing people into your home, into your most sacred space, is a way of embracing who they are to you in your life, right? And the no side of that is, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. The preparations, making sure everything is clean, and then the cleanup and all of that. Yeah. So it's a twofold.
Well, this is why I like asking this question, because I started this podcast in my brand because I really feel like we need to spend more time together. We need to gather as humans. We need more curiosity, less judgment. We need to be able to sit around the table and talk about anything. And so I'm creating beautiful objects for the table and then the conversation, hopefully, through this podcast. But, and my mother was always just the consummate entertainer, set a beautiful table, cooked a beautiful meal, was so welcoming. And I think there are certain ingredients to having a meaningful, successful gathering. One is being present. So meeting your guests at the door, not being cooking in the kitchen, thinking about how you can prepare things ahead of time. Doing potluck. One of my sisters was like, be okay with a dirty house. And I think that's another great one. Like, nobody cares if your house is perfect.
Oh, for me, I always tell my husband, I said, let's plan a party because I clean the house like there's no tomorrow. I clean the crevices that I never knew had dirt in them.
Absolutely. Do you have one or two top resources? They could be books or websites, podcasts, anything at all, to recommend. It does not have to be related to death or the funeral industry. It could just be like a favorite book. We love to give book recommendations, and I've read so many interesting books from books people recommend. So any recommendations?
Well, when I read the question, I thought it had to do with my profession. So I picked some stuff within my profession, but actual books themselves, I haven't read a book in so long. I used to read books all the time when I was younger, but now I just, well, life goes, and I guess I'm the type of person, when I pick up a book, I got to finish it to the end. It's the same with a puzzle for me. If I start a puzzle, I have to finish to the end. So I'll be like up until 3:00 in the morning. I got to get up at 7, right? So I'm getting to the point where I don't want to start a book or a puzzle because it's going to consume me, right?
Okay, well, give us the recommendations from the industry.
My go-to book on everything, like when people are asking me questions, because again, how do you know what you know, right? Obviously the stuff I learned in school, but this is a great book called The History of American Funeral Directing.
Okay.
We call this the Funeral Bible.
By Habenstein and Lammers. The History of American Funeral Directing. Okay.
So I don't know if we have any copies still left at the museum, but you can order it through our website, but you can order it through NFDA's website as well.
And tell us why that's a great book for everybody, not just for professionals.
It's because it really speaks to a lot of customs and traditions that you still see today. A lot of times people are finding stuff in an estate sale, or they're finding stuff that their loved one passed away and they go into the attic and they're having to go through all of this stuff. And they're like, oh gosh, this is, I think, something that's funeral related. And then you're like, well, it's so common that people are like, well, I went on Google search and I can't find anything on this. So if you have a funerary item that you have come across, be it an estate sale, an inheritance, you're cleaning out your grandparents' storage unit, whatever it is, really, truly is hard to find stuff on Google related to our history of our industry and the tools of our trade. That book is a great resource because I even will go to it to try and answer people's questions that write into the contact@nmfh.org on stuff that they have found or come across.
Okay, that's fascinating. I'm getting that.
Yeah. Not to mention it talks about how the hearses used to be the livery stables and how things evolved. It's great. A lot of the customs and traditions that you see today, how they came out of the Victorian time period, and how we went from being funerals in the home and the wake, and how we now have it at the funeral homes that you go to, that the funeral directors run. So it's really, really neat.
Do you have one more? Or
I have some websites that I think are helpful, like for people who are interested in death care, obviously Commonwealth Institute of Funeral Services is a great place to embark upon the profession if you're interested. Two different resources that I have used myself, INELDA, INELDA, which is an International End-of-Life Doula Association. A doula is a profession now. It's a death doula that is starting to take hold in our society now. They're the ones that help people come into your home and help you through that dying process. You know, you were talking about how people utilize their religion for direction, right? Or they say it takes a village to raise a baby. It takes a village to bury a body sometimes, right? Or, prepare that funeral and stuff. People are living longer. People are more transportable, as in like they move far, far away from their family, their loved ones in a nursing home, their kids are in another country, their profession is taking them away from the family. Or they just outlived everybody and they don't have anybody left to help them. A death doula now is a segment of the death care profession that's starting to come into light. And these death doulas, that's what they do. I would consider myself a death doula. I did go to the courses and get the certification. I haven't embarked on it because I just don't have the time. But they're the ones that basically are there at the beginning of that you got the terminal illness, helping you with the funeral arrangements, helping the family understand basically what I did in the hospital, but they're doing it in a home setting for people that don't have the resources. A lot of people have heard of the term doula based off of childbirth. So I asked the question on to you. Did you ever know that the death doula existed?
I did, but I feel like I'm a little bit more interested in this space than the average person. And I think it's wonderful because I think, again, like, let's take the help. Like, like there are people who, we have experts file our taxes. We have experts do all these things. Why don't we find experts who can help us in these difficult things? So.
Yeah, exactly. And I can tell you right now, I mean, it's a fog thing. I mean, the fog is real. And I'm sitting there. I'm the funeral profession. I'm sitting across the table from the funeral professions that are my colleagues. And they're asking me a question and I'm looking left and right. I'm looking at my daughters. I'm like, oh, what was he saying? How do I need to answer this question? Because when it happens to you, I don't care what expertise you possess. They tend to vanish. They vanish. And I don't know where they are. I mean, the same thing happened in the Army. I'm an Army medic. I can respond in a very emergent situation and stay calm and think thoroughly. But my child was choking on a piece of candy and I went weak at the knees and I lost all concept of what I was supposed to do. It's that powerful in how situations that are really, really close to you impact your abilities to properly think. And so a death doula, I think, is a great, like I say, I did that already so much in my life. They just now have a title for it.
Right, exactly.
And then the other association, which I think is also great, is called ADAC, and is one of the associations I first started in when I started my journey professionally in learning about death it's the Association for Death Education and Counseling. And they're another good resource. And, and you don't have to be in the death profession to poke around at these different organizations. I mean, they're really great helping people that are stuck in their grief or having complicated grief or trying to understand are they grieving in a normal way. These are great resources for even the listeners to go in and poke around at their websites. I mean, they're there for the professionals, but you got to think they're teaching the professionals. So if they're teaching the professionals, they have the tools that the end user can use.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not need to be the professional.
These are amazing resources. Last question. Do you have a practice, a focus, a habit, or daily routine that contributes to your success or your well-being?
I don't have a routine. I'm not a routine person. I like the fluidity of change because when I was doing my undergraduate studies, one of the comments that really, I kid you not, I just got my book in the mail. The book was for my course. I opened up the cover, and right there at the beginning of the cover said, the most constant thing in life is change. And I must have read that 5 times until it finally sank in. And when it sank in, it was like a brick hitting me in the head. And I lived by that because when you can live by that knowledge, it really helps you adjust when life doesn't go the way you want it to.
Right, because good or bad, it changes. There was a podcast I was listening to for a while, and it was more about business and entrepreneurship, but the host always said, this too shall pass. And I just also really, really believe that. And unfortunately, it's true for good times, but fortunately, it's also true for bad times.
Yeah, and it also helps you to accept change when it does happen. Some of the things I do for myself is I recognize as a professional in the death care business, I have allowed myself to say, I have to step away. I need my boundaries. So I have established boundaries when it comes for caring for other families. And if you are in the death care business and you're listening to this, one thing I do challenge you is identify your boundaries and know where they are and implement them. As a palliative nurse, I used to find myself always being the one. I was like the Mikey, right? I worked there part-time. So whenever I'd come on, they're like, oh, good, Genevieve's here. Genevieve, there's a family in such and such room. You need to go in and handle them. Oh, so-and-so's family's calling. Can you handle them? And so I was always the one because everyone knew I was the death care professional, right? I was even teaching my coworkers on things to do. And people don't realize that when you're dealing with even the death of somebody that you don't know and their family, we're human and we absorb those emotions. Kind of like how an item absorbs the smells that stay with it, those emotions absorb into us as well. And because we're not Superman, we don't have an armor, or, steel armor around us that it can penetrate or bounce off of. It penetrates us. And it can be exhausting. And I've had to at times go in and say, you know what? I'm tapping out of this one. I'm just not there. And I'm doing that for myself, but I'm also doing it for the family because they need somebody who is 100% available and 100% ready to answer their questions and help absorb some of those emotions that go on in the room.
So knowing your boundaries, I mean, that's a pretty big self-care thing that a lot of people never learn, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I have to say it didn't come easy. I mean, I do not hesitate to seek professional counseling. They have come so far. Being a veteran, mental health has become like right up there with heart disease issues, right? The brain is an organ and the brain deserves to have just as much attention as your heart because without your heart, you can't function your brain. Without your brain, your heart can't function, right? So they're 2 very important organs that have a profound effect on our abilities to live and function.
Totally agree. I had a therapist on and she said, ask your therapist if they get therapy, because if the answer is no, find another therapist. Because of what you're talking about, like therapists, just like people in your industry, are carrying a lot, and you need to be able to process it, and take care of yourself.
Exactly. And when I tell people I'm a funeral director, they're like, you don't look like a funeral director.
What does that mean?
Okay, what am I supposed to look like? Am I supposed to be in a black suit with a top hat and have a grim look to my face and be very pale? And I just find it interesting that some people, we have our profession has an expected look, right? An expected appearance. And I always have like this very upbeat, bright aura to me. That's just who I am as a person. And I like to hope that that transcends into the people that are around me. But when people say I don't look like a funeral director, it kind of throws me off a little bit. But another thing they always say is funeral directors have a warped sense of humor. And I always have to tell them, if you understood what we dealt with on a daily basis, we need to have laughter to balance out our emotions. Because although we're the funeral director on the other side of that desk and we're helping you through this process, we are also human.
Yeah.
So we have to be able to have laughter in our life to pull us out of that negative emotions that we are absorbing.
And thank goodness for people like you who want to go into this profession, who were I don't know if driven or there was something like innate in you. And I say the same thing for people who go into the military. You did both, so bless you. But,
Thank you.
We need the people who are willing to do the hard work, put themselves in harm's way, both physically and emotionally. And not everyone can do it. Not everyone can do it.
I always say that, in my profession, you don't choose your profession chooses you. Truly.
And hopefully you find it, coming back full circle to purpose. Hopefully you find that. That's what I hope for my children, that they find their purpose, and some people don't find it, but you certainly have. It has been a gift speaking with you, Genevieve.
Thank you.
I'm very, very sorry for your loss and sending you so much love, and so grateful for everything that you've shared. In a weird way, maybe I feel like the timing of this discussion was perfect because you were able to share of yourself in a way that maybe you would not have been able to, that I think is really helpful for people. And I'm just grateful.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to an episode of On the Table with Ashley. Subscribing to, rating, and reviewing our show helps us to continue to make quality episodes. So please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. On the Table with Ashley is presented by Amatond, an elevated, everyday, luxury home and tableware brand with products designed to cultivate connection. You can learn more about Amatond at amatendre.com or on Instagram at Amatond. By subscribing to our newsletter on the Amatond website, you'll receive updates on new episodes as well as promotions relating to Amatond and Amatond's products. Send us an email at reachoutanytime@amatond.com if you have ideas for guests or series ideas you'd like to pass along. Thanks for listening.